Hello everyone, welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with a continuation of our OBR Battletome analysis, but as you're aware at this point, this isn't actually about the OBR book, it's just using it as a case study to really talk about Battletome analysis in general. This time, in part 5, we'll be covering OBR spells, including the endless spells that are available to the army. So stay tuned for that momentarily. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe, share, join the Discord, comment below, all that good stuff. Really helps boost the signal for the channel. All right, so as we've covered before, we've got kind of a timeline here of things that we're trying to touch base on. We started with the battle traits for the army in general, moved on to battle line units, both unconditional and conditional, then started looking at sub-factions, and now we're on to the spell lore, which, like I said, includes the 3 endless spells the army has access to. In future videos, we'll be looking at the enhanceable heroes, and then the enhancements those heroes can take, and then we'll kind of just split up the rest of what's in the book, some of the big guys, the unique heroes, and so forth. You might notice that I didn't manage to cover the terrain piece in the battle traits, which I usually would put there, but it had totally skipped my mind that this army has a terrain piece. So we'll find another way to squeeze that in here at some point later on. And as a reminder, this series is not about analyzing the OBR Battletome per se, as I mentioned. It's more about seeing how someone with a bunch of Battletome analysis experience would approach this, including writing in the book, doing some basic statistical or probabilistic calculations for different units, what I underline, what I don't, what I think is important to make sure you walk away from to get a bigger picture. And remember, I intentionally went into this Battletome ignorant of everything about it, so I was reading it kind of with a fresh perspective as I was looking at it. It's not really a Battletome review, but more a study on how to break down a Battletome, and should be applicable to all armies. All right, let's move on.
All right, time for spell lores. The reason why I'm covering spell lores next is because some armies really rotate around their spells. This is not a priest army from what I can gather. I didn't see any priest stuff going on. And I know that they have 3 endless spells, so they're definitely leaning in that direction. They have a number of casters. Obviously, Nagash is in the list, or in the he's an option, and he knows all these spells. So while I'm talking about that, actually, just quick, they didn't add Nagash to the top of this, and he doesn't gain the keyword. So they kind of, this happened with Soulblight as well. I feel like they need to address this because the standard is that if someone gets access to the lore outside, it needs to go both ways. It needs to say it on both his war scroll, which it does, that he knows this lore, and it needs to say it here. Otherwise, he gets locked out because he doesn't get to use this. It's a little weird, but anyway, I think they'll just FAQ it, or not designer's commentary, but add new wording. So they've got 6 spells here, and the spells might prove to be kind of mediocre. I don't know, but the spells can often kind of give you an indication for how the army wants to play and what it's trying to do, especially if it's a spell heavy or magic heavy army. More so, I would say, than the command traits and the artifacts, which is why I'm not covering them yet, because every caster gets access to this, and you can take multiple copies of it. I mean, hell, you can even do an enhancement to have people learn 2 spells per person. So that goes a long way. And then we got the endless spells. So we got 9 spells to cover here. Whenever I'm doing the enhancements, because I keep track of these things, I like to write how many we've got. So you can see that we've got 6. So there are 6 spells here. Easy enough. Fortunately, they did include in unique units. Sometimes they forget to put that in, and then they have to FAQ it out, but TOs would probably let you play anyway. Now, every time I read a spell, I immediately do something with both the casting value and the range. The reason I do that is because they bury it in the text, and I hate searching for it. So this says it has Empower Naderite Weapons. This is the one that they had the designer's commentary on for the Ivory Coast. Not Ivory Coast. Is that what it's called? Ivory Host, sorry. But anyway, casting value 5. I always write the casting value here in a box, so I know how much it is. And then range, I always put right next to it, inches. And then I'll read a little further, and if it's wholly within, I put a line underneath it, and it is. Because 24 inches wholly and 24 inches not makes a big difference sometimes. So I just this is my little shorthand code. I don't have to bother reading the first 2-3 sentences. Visibility is usually there. So if it doesn't say something about visibility, maybe I'll write a note, but I just assume it's there most of the time. So that covers most of this stuff. You're picking one friendly unit wholly within range visible caster. And then the real rules. Until the start of your next hero phase, so this is the best version of this wording, the Naderite weapon's battle trait triggers on an unmodified hit roll of 5+ instead of 6 for that unit. So this is exploding hits on 5s. I haven't done the math on that either. Maybe I should do that at some point after this, now that we're getting to see how these two rules interact. So on 5, so it literally, if you're not aware of the dice roll probabilities, 1 out of 6 versus 2 out of 6, it literally doubled the amount of output that it's triggering the extra, you're not exploding more, you're just exploding more often, if that makes sense, with this spell. Now granted, of course it's a spell. It's not a command ability that can be issued with this army, at least, to unlimited units. It's just one unit, but it's still pretty cool. I like it. And then if we compare it to the designer's commentary down here, if a unit is affected by the Ivory Host ability and the Empower Naderite spell, the effect of this ability is only applied on an unmodified hit roll of 6. So I think at that point, you don't get to choose. You have to go for 6s, do triple exploding hits. But remember, in Ivory Host, it's only if that your unit took some amount of damage or wounds earlier in the turn. So that's, in a sense, a way that you could have choice or control over it in a little bit. But your enemy could turn off the 5+ if they want by simply doing some damage to that unit and putting them back on 6s. So that's interesting. All right, but I like the spell. All right, Protection of Nagash, which, if you followed the Broken Realms Teclis book, where Teclis and Nagash had a big showdown and Nagash killed him or whatever at the end. Of course, he doesn't ever really die. This is kind of a interesting kind of counter to Protection of Teclis. It's a spell with casting value 6 and no range, which means it's probably unlimited or only applies to this unit. It's successfully cast at the end of any phase if any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated to the caster in that phase from an attack made with a melee weapon. Important. And it has to be an attack, by the way. And the caster was not slain. Remove them from the battlefield and set them up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. After setting up this this spell is unbound. Interesting. At the end of any phase, so it's putting this kind of bubble on this guy. Okay. If any wounds or mortal wounds are allocated cast in that phase from attack made with a melee weapon, so it would implicitly have to happen in combat, and the caster was not slave, remove them from the battlefield, set them up on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. After setting up the caster, this spell is unbound. So the bubble goes away. The Protection of Nagash bubble, you can't keep triggering this. So for example, if they could do damage in the hero phase with a hero phase attack, and then did it in the combat phase, which they obviously, after a teleport, they could charge you, of course. So it only happens once. You kind of blew your load on that one. But it does protect your guy, and it gives you some movement shenanigans. Now, it doesn't have to be on a hero. I was picturing a hero. Oh, it's on the caster. Yeah, sorry. So it's allocated to the caster. It is on the hero. So if your caster's projecting a bubble that you really needed, now that you have to be outside of 9 inches, it might make it a little harder. So your enemy could use that, your opponent could use that to your disadvantage by forcing you to kind of ruin your bubbles. But at least it keeps them alive, right? All right, and our last one on the first column is reinforce constructs. Reinforced concentration spell is a casting value of 5, range of 18. 18, wholly within range. All right. Pick one friendly Ossiarch Bone Reaper's unit wholly within range visible until your next hero phase. That unit has a ward of 4+ against mortal wounds. So, like I said before about the, let me just look at the name of the trait again. Deathless Warriors. Deathless minions must be in Soul Blight. The Deathless Warriors 6+ ward, and then the Ossiarch command that makes it better. This does not interact with that. Once you get a 4+ ward, you're just on the 4+ ward. Now keep in mind, this is just against mortal wounds, not regular wounds. This is easy to miss. It's kind of like how Endless Spell and Spell have to be always mentioned separately, in the same way that Dispel, Unbind need to be mentioned separately, and Mortal Wounds and Wounds have to be mentioned separately. This is only a mortal wound save, so you would still get to use your 6+ or maybe 5+ Deathless Warriors, was it? Ward save for normal wounds. This is only for mortal wounds. So it's worth keeping that in mind. Some armies aren't going to do mortal wounds to you at all. And so if you took this spell as your chosen spell for your wizard, and you didn't like his War Scroll spell, you're kind of screwed if that army doesn't generate mortal wounds to begin with. I mean, you're not screwed, but it's thrown away, right? This ability. So this is the kind of thing about careful reading. And as you read these things more often, again, this is like my 21st, 3rd edition Battletome, because I have all of them to read and analyze. You get used to looking for these little clauses that are really important catches. I guarantee you someone at a tournament is going to cast this, and not because they were trying to cheat, accidentally give themselves a 4+ ward against regular wounds. And this is arming yourself against that too. You might not even catch it if you just read it quickly at the tournament. Wow, 4+ ward, that's great. But it's not what it looks like. Okay. Drain Vitality. Here we are. Spell that has a casting value of 6, range 18. 6. 18. Pick one enemy unit within range. So it's not holy, so I don't need to do the bubble thing. Until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit, and subtract 1 from save rolls for attacks that target that unit. Okay, that's pretty good. So you're making them harder to hit, and I always write here, including shooting, because a lot of times we forget. If it doesn't say hit rolls from melee or hit rolls from shooting, then it applies to both. But we think about melee kind of as our default setting, and then the shooting, this is big, right? So if you're targeting a unit that really needs to hit with those shooting and profiles, that can make a big difference. But of course, you only have a range of 18, but still. And subtract 1 from save rolls for attacks that target that unit. So that would be, of course, in both phases. Okay, I don't hate it. Drain Vitality. Don't we have something else that says Vitality and maybe Drain in Soulblight? I could have sworn there was something like that. All right, Mortal Contract. Mortal Contract spell is casting value 7, range of 18. So we got 7, range of 18. And it's enemy unit, so it's not holy then. Pick one enemy unit within range visible to caster for the rest of the battle. I like seeing that. That's always a strong ability. Roll a dice at the end of each phase in which any attacks made by that unit, and again, so we got phase, any attacks, so that's only melee profiles and missile profiles, not magic or anything like that, made by that unit, inflicted any damage on a friendly Ossiarch Bone Reaper's unit. On a 3+, that enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. You cannot pick the same enemy unit to be affected by the spell more than once per battle. That's important. So a lot of little caveats here. By the way, D3 mortal wounds is on average 2 mortal wounds, and then on a 3-up is 1.33. So there's an average of 1.33 mortal wounds per trigger. So you're basically cursing you could keep doing this to different different people. It doesn't have to be a hero. It's just a unit. And every time it does any amount of damage through its attacks, melee and missile, on a 3-up, it suffers D3 mortal wounds at the end of each phase. So yeah, and because of the use of any here, also with any damage, it doesn't, even if they split their attacks, like let's say there's a big unit, you put this on, they do it against 2 different units. You don't get to roll twice for this ability because it did damage against 2 of your units in OBR. It only triggers if it did any damage, so you'd roll once. So, but I mean, obviously the most amount of units you could put this on in one game is 5, assuming they have normal casting limitations. And then turn 1, you would maybe not be in range, but maybe you would. So realistically, you're thinking about 2 to 3 maybe units that are affected by this in the game. But I'd say it's still pretty good. It's interesting. Of course, you got to remember that stuff. That's the thing. And of course, they can just turn it off by not attacking you. So you don't want to put it on a unit that's just meant to deck chair sit or whatever, where they're sitting on an objective not doing anything. So it's something. Definitely don't put it on a hero, because a lot of ground heroes don't even want to attack. You can force them to attack by being in combat, but you can't force them to shoot. And even then, a lot of those ground heroes are not that great in combat that they would actually do any damage. So it's a thought. All right, last one, Soul Release. Spell with a casting value 5. And once again, no range. Until your next hero phase, enemy reserve units and enemy summoned units cannot set up within 12 inches of the caster. So it's kind of got a 12-inch range. The range of the spell must be measured from the caster, even if an ability would allow you to measure it from elsewhere. Example, Spell Portal. So Umbral Spell Portal is not helping you there. Okay. And it's only until your next hero phase. This is really particular. Reserve units and summoned units. God, that seems just very niche-y. That's the kind of thing that you want someone that knows the whole lore to just have on deck if you need it. But like, I don't know if I'd ever choose that unless you're always playing death armies or armies that go in reserve. But a lot of times reserve units, I mean, it says 12 inches and they want to be outside 9. So again, all it's doing is just making it have to set up a little bit further than normal. It's adding 3 inches to their setup range, which means they can't make a charge. I mean, that's something. No one's going to deep strike charge you with that unless they've got a charge bonus that's like an 18-inch charge. Yeah, so all in all, we're looking at average casting value here is like a 6, 5 something. We've got 3 5s, 2 6s, and a 7. So the average casting value of all the spells. We've got 2 that are like some amount of based off the caster that don't target an enemy unit or a friendly unit. Is just off the caster. So that'd be Protection to Gash for the bubble and Soul Release, the one we just covered. You got 2 that target your own units, which make the Naderite weapons explode on 5s, or that give them a ward of 4+ against mortal wounds only. And then you got 2 against enemy units, 1 that makes them, anytime they do damage, it punishes them, possibly, and Drain Vitality is -1 hit and save. I would not say this is particularly a book-defining spell lore, these 6 spells, but I need to look at the endless spells too. And of course, this isn't all the spell like capability that we have, the magic capability that an army has. You've got the caster's own spells. So keep that in mind. But we'll cover endless spells momentarily. All right, so let's take a look at the endless spells, which kind of rounds out our spells collection here. We've got 3. I don't know these guys pretty much at all. Yeah, I'm taking a look at them, and I don't know if I've ever played against any of them. So let's take a look. Nightmare Predator. And if I remember correctly, these were all around 40, 50 points. So that's good enough for me to know off the bat. Nightmare Predator. is summoned with a spell, has a casting value of 5, range of 12 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and write that here. And a range of 12 inches. And if successfully cast, set it up within range and visible to the caster and more than 1 inch from all models, other endless spells and invocations. This is interesting because usually when we have something like this, it has to be set up wholly within. But this is just within, which is, okay, unique. A wizard in a garrison cannot attempt to summon this endless spell. And if this endless spell is summoned, the wizard that summoned it cannot join a garrison until this endless spell has been removed from play. It's also predatory, which means it's got a movement characteristic of 8 inches and flies. Okay, so that's the normal predatory speed, by the way. So it's got 2 rules here. One is bonded, and this is actually not its main rule. It's connected to the summoning of it. This endless spell is bonded to the model that summoned it. A bonded endless spell is always controlled by the model to which it is bonded. Okay? A model cannot be bonded to more than 1 endless spell at the same time and cannot attempt to summon other endless spells while it is bonded. If the model that summoned this endless spell is removed from play, then this endless spell is removed from play. Okay. With Seraphon at one point we had bonded endless spells. I don't know if this has anything to do with this. And this sounds familiar that maybe we had this in OBR. As I quickly look at the other ones, they're all bonded as well. So I'm assuming the wording is the same, but I'll double check that when it happens. All right, so its main rule, Death Incarnate. After this endless spell has moved, roll a dice for each unit that has any models it passed across. On a 2+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Then the commanding player can pick 1 unit within 1 inch of this endless spell and roll a dice. On a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 5, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, that unit suffers D6 mortal wounds. This ability has no effect on OBR units. Okay, so first off, it's doing a flat 2+ D3 mortal wounds against every unit it passed across. Now it's only moving 8 inches, so it might not be hitting as many as that sounds like, but that's an average of 1.67 mortal wounds per unit that it runs over. Plus, on a 1, nothing happens. 2 to 5 is another D3, and on a 6, it does D6. So the math on that's real easy. 2 to 5 is 4 out of 6 of the die rolls that are possible, and that's times D3, so that's 4 to 6 times 2, plus 1 out of 6 times 3.5 for the average for D6. So that's 1.92 mortal wounds versus 1 unit. And that's it. That's what it does. So by being bonded to your caster, they're allowed to cast other spells, but they're not allowed to cast other endless spells while it's bonded. You could try to get rid of it, but the only way to get rid of it is to dispel it at its casting value, rolling higher than its casting value of 5, or for him to die, of course. But then, of course, he can't cast anything else. Cool model. Yeah. Okay, so that's what that one does. Some mortal wounds. All right, here we are. Soul Stealer Carrion. And carrion is a bird, by the way, for people that don't know. And so that's this, or it's a type of bird. Okay, endless spell is summoned with a spell that has a casting value of 6. Okay, so I'll go and write that down here. 6. If successfully cast this endless spell anywhere on the battlefield that is visible to the caster and more than 1 inch from all models. Oh, wow. So it's got unlimited range. It can go anywhere. That you don't see very often. And it's predatory, so its movement characteristic is 8 inches. It's bonded. Let's see if it's the exact same wording. Yeah, I think it's the exact same. And then its ability, models with a wounds characteristic of 1 or 2 that are within 6 inches of this endless spell cannot contest objectives. This ability has no effect on OBR units. So it's not doing any damage, but you can drop it anywhere, and then it just moves to follow some unit around, some poor unit, that turns off 1 and 2 model units. Wow, that's actually pretty strong. You teleport a GC. Well, I don't know if they've got that. You could at least Tunnel Master, but You can put, yeah, you can put a unit over on that objective, and even if you have way less bodies, you can go grab it. That's cool. Okay, and last one. So these are going fast. Alrighty. Bone Tithe Shrieker. I might have seen this one once before. Someone with a spell is casting value 5 and range of 12. Let's see if that's a holy within. So within range, visible to the caster more. Wow, another one. So all three of these are breaking some amount of the range rules for setting up the spell, if not all of them. Okay, only OBR. It's predatory. So all three of them are predatory. So it's got movement characteristic 8 inches. It's bonded, same thing. And Portent of Doom. So units cannot receive the Inspiring Presence or Rally commands while they're within 12 inches in the spell. No effect in OBR. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the same thing as what Archeon does. Same bubble too. Granted on a smaller base. So it's projecting less of a surface area. But still good. Yeah. Rally, of course, has gotten nerfed recently, but Inspiring Presence is always strong to turn off. And then subtract 1 from ward rolls for units within 12 inches of this in the spell. This has no effect on OCR. That's a unique ability too. -1 to ward rolls. Okay. So we've got one that's doing damage and could do a good bit, one that's turning off objective holding, and one that is turning off, or it's making wards worse and turning off rallying and Inspiring Presence. Not bad. I don't know if I would say this is, again, spell defining for this army, but there is a unique quality to this with them being bonded and with them being having interesting range setups, especially for the carrion. Yeah, I think I could see play for these things for sure. And it definitely lends a certain amount of debuff / control element to the army, which is good for an army that is slower on its feet sometimes. And before I forget, while I'm here, I should have included this earlier because the terrain piece is free, and I forgot that they had one. And I would normally include this in my looking at the battle traits. So this might actually answer some of my questions about different things that have come up with regards to things I don't know about the army. I do know that this faction terrain piece is huge. I don't think you can, it's impassable, so you can't stand on it, which is good because it was hard to put models on there anyway. All right, so it's an OBR thing. It's set up after territories wholly within your territory, more than 3 inches from all objectives and other terrain features. And by the way, all terrain has to be outside of 3 of objectives, so that's nothing new. If these restrictions mean you cannot set up this faction terrain feature, you can remove one terrain feature that is wholly or partially within your territory. I'm not going to underline that because it's for both. And attempt to set up this faction terrain feature again. If it's still impossible, then it's not used. So interesting is this is, according to my recollection, the third faction terrain piece, or actually second, because Seraphon, I've seen the leaks for Seraphon already. So that's the third. But the first was the Gitz Loon Shrine, then this, and then Seraphon's terrain piece, which they've got a rule that says if you can't set it up, you're allowed to move a terrain feature, which is a big deal. I could really use that on the Luneth Shrine when you're playing something like Realmstone Cache. Like, I played a game at a tournament with that where you just couldn't fit all your guys in there with the shrine, so I just didn't include it. So you're getting hit by a kind of nerf, if that's the thing. And then some terrain packs at tournaments are not particularly good at thinking this through when they tell you where to put the terrain and stuff. Anyway, it's also impassable, and it's got a whole bunch of rules. All right, Deadly Gaze. In your hero phase, you can choose for this terrain feature to deliver one of the following punishments. Okay. So it's not a whole bunch of rules. It's 4 different modes, which kind of lines up with some of the other things we've seen, right? Where, like, at least the, what's it called? The Necropolis Stalkers with the 3 different heads, but 4 different modes, I guess, that they could do. It's kind of got this going on. And I guess you can see that in the guy on top. Okay, Punishment of Agony. Pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of this terrain feature invisible to it and roll a dice. Add 1 to the roll if any enemy models were slain within 12 inches of this terrain feature in the previous turn. On a 4 plus, or a 3 plus if you do that, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit until your next hero phase. Okay. I see a couple things here. One, if adding 1 for enemy models that were slain within 12 inches in a previous turn requires you to be on top of your shit in order to know that this needs to be marked, because we're not usually keeping track of exactly where models died. And so you want to keep an eye on, and 12 inches is large, by the way. Off of this giant base, it's going to be a large chunk of the battlefield, and it's just enemy models. It would be cool if it was friendly models too, but it's not, so that you could get the buff. But so it's basically that model's been sacrificed to the thing, and then you sacrifice to hit rolls. So, okay. And that's the previous turn, which again, this is in your hero phase. So if you double turn and it's in your turn, yeah, so you just got to be on top of this, and it's not always in your opponent's turn. Okay. And it's only going off on a 4 plus. So it could be a 3 plus, but I don't know. That's not doing a whole lot. I'm not that impressed by that one. If that was all it did, I'd say this thing is just taking up space. But let's look. Number 2, pick 1 enemy unit within 18 inches of this terrain feature invisible to it and roll a dice. Add 1 to the roll of it. Okay, same thing. On a 4 plus, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So that's, well, a 4 plus for 2, average of 2 is an average of 1 mortal wound. And that's going to, on a 3 plus, 1.33. Now, I'm assuming now that all of these are going to have +1. So it makes it a little less obnoxious to keep track of because you're constantly aware of it for all 4 of the abilities maybe. But let's see. Punishment 3 is of ignorance. Pick 1 enemy wizard or priest within 18 inches of this terrain feature invisible to it and roll a dice. Add 1 to the hit roll if any enemy models were slain. Yep, same. On a 4 plus, subtract 1 from casting rolls or chanting rolls for that unit until your next hero phase. Okay. It's particularly good against priests because there's not a whole lot of interaction you get with priests, and I don't think this book has any priests, so that's something. But again, only max going off on a 3 plus. You really want to be killing enemy models around it, which makes sense. It's a bone tithe nexus. You're sacrificing bones to be used around this thing. So you're trying to collect bones from the enemy. And then last one, punishment of lethargy. Pick 1 enemy unit within 18, all the normal stuff. On a 4 plus, that unit cannot run until your next hero phase. In addition, subtract 3 from charge rolls. Okay, I was going to say, just saying that they can't run is not that disempowering. But subtracting 3 from charge rolls can be a big deal. Yeah. So, I guess that's something. I'm going to say this isn't that great of a terrain piece. It's cool that it's flexible, but it's not. There's not much that's making it go off better. Now, that said, I'm fully aware there could be a command trait that bumps it up +1 as well to like on a 2 up. I still don't know that would be worth it because maybe there's something better to be taking. Or maybe if something dies around it, then it goes up by +2. That could be cool. I don't know. I could see that being a thing, but I just don't know. It's a big-ass terrain piece, though. That's for sure. So at this point, we've covered the pitch battle profiles, the regular battle traits, and now including the terrain piece. We've covered the potential battle line units, their war scrolls in good detail. We've also covered the sub-factions, the spell lores, and now the endless spells. So probably most logical now would be to finally look at those command traits and artifacts to get a sense. Or another option would be say, let's look at the heroes that can take those command traits and artifacts. So that would be non-unique heroes, generic heroes. I lean towards that so that we know what those command traits and artifacts could be put on. So let's go there.
And there we have it. Once again, thanks for watching this series. I know it's not for everyone, but I really appreciate the people that are here. If you could, comment below or reach out at some point. Let me know what you liked about the video. and what we could do better with in these videos moving forward. Obviously, this series was pre-recorded, but it's always good to know what kind of things we could be bringing to the table that you guys really enjoy. Hopefully, you're enjoying what we've got out there as it is. In the meantime, feel free to like, subscribe, share, and keep the conversation going as usual. And I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll be covering enhanceable heroes. So those that are generic, aren't unique, and can take command traits, artifacts, and so forth. All right. In the meantime, Ryan out.